Hi everybody, welcome to this new episode of the GenAI Nerd channel. And in this video I want to show you the power of the Codex app of OpenAI for automating workflows. And actually, if you go to your ChatGPT subscription, you will see on the left hand side something called Codex. And I expect that actually lots of people have never clicked on this, but if you click on that, it actually opens for you a magical world where you can start automating a lot of stuff like you can also do in Cloud Cowork. So that's what I want to show you in this video. Now, before I get started, let me briefly highlight that I'm also offering workshops on generative AI for business applications. So at my website, you can see the offerings that I provide at the WHU Otto Beisheim School of Management. If you're interested in that, check out the link below. Now let's get started. So here I'm in my traditional ChatGPT account. And so when you have a subscription, you will here on the left-hand side have Codex. So when I click on that, you go into the kind of Codex environment of ChatGPT. And then you can click here on app or here, and then actually it will ask you to download the Codex app from your computer. So this is then what you need to do, and then you can start using this separate Codex app, which has a lot of potential for automating workflows. So now I'm in my Codex app, and so this is the place where ChatGPT can actually directly communicate with folders on your computer. And how can you do that? So here, if you go to this space, you can add a new project. And if you click on that, you simply have to select a folder on your computer. And when you have selected that folder, Codex will be able to communicate with the files in that folder, which means it can read these files, it can edit these files, but it can also delete files. So in that case, you need to be a bit careful and make sure that you select specific folders to which you want to give ChatGPT access. And after we have created a new project, we can start adding context so that ChatGPT, and in this case the Codex app, will really understand what we want to do in this project. And in the Codex app, the best way to provide context is to create what is called an Agent.md file. And so this will be a file where we describe kind of what is the purpose that we want to do in this particular project. We will give it some instructions, some rules, so that it perfectly has context to execute what we want. So let me briefly show you how you can easily create such an Agent.md file. So now I'm back into my normal ChatGPT environment, and here I want to create an Agent.md file. And what do I want to do? I actually want to create a project in which the Codex app can help me to every day kind of search on the internet for new academic papers about generative AI in management journals and kind of keep track of the new papers published in an Excel sheet. That's what I want to accomplish. And so in order to do so, I want to create an Agent.md file that will provide the necessary context. So here is the prompt that I've written. So I'm just saying, please create an Agent.md file for these FAMs that helps to identify and report on a daily basis about new papers in management journals that touch upon the topic of generative AI that might be relevant for him. And I give it even some additional kind of context here. And then it has been thinking for like 5 minutes. And then it has created for me two files, the Agent.md file. This is the file with all the instructions. And it already also created for me a template Excel sheet in which it can add new papers when it identifies new papers. So with this prompt, I now have already created the foundation for my project in Codex. So now we can go back to the Codex app. So in the Codex app, I already have quite some projects. And so let me show you the project that I have to find Gen AI papers. So this is my Gen AI paper scanner folder. And let me now briefly show you how that folder looks like. So here I'm in the folder, and this is simply a folder on my computer. So this is the Gen AI paper scanner folder. And you see I've now uploaded here this Agent.md file and the Excel file. And so let me now briefly show you how this Agent.md file actually looks like. So now I'm in my Agent.md file, and you see this is simply a text file with an extensive kind of description about what I want to accomplish here. So it says that the purpose is to track newly published or newly posted papers in top-level journals. It has some information about my user profile. It has kind of identified top management journals that it should screen. Here it has some additional journals. it states the topic scope and so on and so on. Here are some exclusion rules. So this is what the prompt has created for me. And of course, I can now fine tune if I want to add information, add specifications, I can perfectly fine tune this. But at the moment, we can use this as a starting point to start executing a workflow in my particular folder. Yes, and so now I'm again in Codex, so I have my folder, and now when I simply want to create a new scan, I can simply type in scan for new papers. So I can now write extremely short prompts because the context, what it exactly needs to do, how it needs to do that is actually in my Agent.md file. And so now when I press enter, Codex will actually go into that folder, and the first thing it will do is to actually read this Agent.md file to get a good understanding about what it needs to do. And then it will actually start executing the task, in this case, create a scan of the papers that it needs to scan. So now it will start working, and then we can take a look at the final results. So now it finished the scan. And you can see it already mentions here that it's now updated my Excel sheet based on the scan. So now let me show you what has happened in the Excel sheet. So now I can simply go to the Excel sheet in my folder. So here I'm now in my Excel sheet, and you can see that indeed it's now for today, which is March 29. It has added some additional papers to my Excel that were not there before. So in that way, every time when I say scan for papers, it will add information to the Excel. It will add papers that were not there before. So that's what you can do. Yes, and I can even go one step further. I can now say, can you schedule this as a daily automation? And then actually Codex will transform this daily scan into an automation where it automatically will scan my papers every day on a specific date and time that I have defined. So in that way, I can now create a fully automated workflow that will automatically be executed every time. And you can see your automations here in this step called automation. So when I go now to my automations, you can see that I now have a daily paper scan. So this is now a daily execution of this paper scan in my folder. So now every morning it will update this Excel automatically, and I can just go to my Excel to see what has happened. Finally, let me now briefly go back to my Excel, and what you will see here is that it is identifying papers. And here, for instance, is identified indeed very recent papers, but sometimes I notice that it has kind of identified papers that are already older, whereas my main purpose is to identify the most recent papers. So now what we can do is actually go back to our Codex app to optimize the Agent.md file to make sure that I only get recent papers. So now I'm back into my Codex app, and I can now briefly start a new chat. And now I can say something like, I noticed that when scanning for papers, sometimes older papers are identified and added to the Excel. Adjust the Agent.md file to make sure that the scan focuses on recent papers, meaning papers that have been published in the past week, for instance. So now I can press enter, and now actually it will go into this Agent.md file and start adjusting this file in order to address the issue that I mentioned. And in this way, you can now kind of continuously update your context environment based on your learnings. And of course, if you really do that, then step by step, your instructions in the Agent.md file will become more personalized, more optimized. And that's how you can actually, over time, create extremely good instructions that are really tailored to what you want to accomplish. So I hope this shows how you can now use the Codex app of OpenAI as a valuable tool to automate workflows. I hope this is helpful for you, and thanks for your attention. Bye.